Doug Howard with Grow Team Strategies, and I'm here with Kathi Fleck, one of our star consultants. And we're here today with another episode of Selling the Dream. And today we're going to talk about running through the finish line, making sure that once you're in the process of starting to sell the business, even when you have an offer that you're negotiating, and sometimes even beyond that, when you've got an offer you've accepted but it hasn't closed yet, it's so important to keep things moving and keep the business active and keep it growing and all those things. And we see sometimes people that will kind of start to wind down and some of the challenges that creates. And so we really want to talk about that today. So, Kathi, how are you?
I'm doing fine. It's beautiful rainy weather here in Texas.
Okay. All right.
We can
Well,
use it.
yeah. So I know, the period of time from when you decided to sell to selling and then selling to closing, what kind of ranges of time were those?
Well, I first explored selling in the summer of 2017, and then when I got the valuation back, I knew I wasn't ready for it, so I put that on hold. And then looked at it again in 2019 and wasn't quite right. So I knew 2020 was going to really be the time frame. And we talked about this before, but putting it on the market right when COVID hit. So I was told that could take up to 2 years, which seemed kind of surprising to me. In my mind, I thought, well, I'll put it on the market and it'll sell that year, and then I'll stay on for a year and help them transition. So that was just in my head.
Gotcha.
But it took 2 years, and so it actually April to April, so it sold in April of 22. And then I really only stayed on a very short time, so things weren't as I expected. But you just don't really know if it's going to sell or how it's going to sell or what you're going to need to do.
Right. So when you were going through that process, what kinds of things did you have to kind of really consciously say, like, I got to stay with this. I've got to keep pushing that, pushing things forward. Because I know even when we talk to like the folks at IAG, the mergers and acquisition company, and they said that like this is one of the biggest challenges. Like people sort of start to wind down.
Yeah. Well, putting it on the market in the start of COVID, I didn't even know if the business was going to make it through COVID. We all had that scary reality going on. We didn't really know what was going to happen. So for me at that point, it was really, we had projects in line, we had projects that were working, we had staff that we needed to keep on board and just try to keep the business going. So once we got through the initial few months and things started opening up and we could go back into homes and work, it was really, let's keep the business going. But at the same time, the business was on the market, but nothing was really happening.
Right.
So I would say I got a couple offers in September of 21, thinking that it was going to close the end of the year. But yes, it was a lot of work keeping the business going. 21 was a really good year for remodeling. So there was a lot of activity and pushing through all those jobs and then acquiring new jobs because the banks and the buyer really wanted to look at a viable business, and was the business really going to keep on going, and was there enough work there to keep it, to make it sellable. So I never stopped, and it took 6 months really for us to close the business, the sale. But at that time, I still was continuing to work. And even when the new owner came on board, I was still signing contracts. So it was all business as usual for me.
Now, what about things like I would think like hiring, marketing, like it's gotta make you feel a little bit different when you're saying like, "Hey, I'm coming down the home stretch. Should I
Mm-hmm.
really be thinking about this with the buyer? Does that change things if I add something? Like, did you have any of those experiences when you were kind of like, do I renew this for another year? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I did have some staff leave during 2020. And since it was kind of slower during 2020, I just picked up some of that myself. But it was kind of crucial to me to have staff, because if me being the face of the business and carrying a big load, if I was losing staff, what would I really have to offer the new owner? So I did not replace any staff. We just worked it as it was. And I figured if we needed to replace staff, then I would have to do that whenever it was necessary.
Yeah.
Um, and then as far as marketing goes, I did kind of space out some of the magazine ads that I was running. And I don't think I signed anything for 22 because I sold the business in April of 22 and we were already kind of under contract. But I was a little bit more careful at the very end as far as picking up additional advertising.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people really, when they start to look at it, especially things that have like a year-long commitment, that
Hmm.
really becomes something that becomes a challenge. But I think the bottom line is people need to run these businesses until they're not their businesses, right?
Right.
I mean, they need to, I always think of like, inauguration day, right? We inaugurate a new president, right? For months, we know who's coming in. They're going to have the power. They're going to have the authority. But the person in the seat's got to still basically make decisions right up until they swear in the new person,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
was. It really was that way. Well, even at when the new owner came on board, I asked him what part he wanted me to play, and he said he wanted me to just keep running business as usual. And so I did, and since I had my hand so much involved with it in it, he didn't really like that too much and started immediately taking it away. So there was that kind of push pull. What part do I do and what part does he do until he learned? So, it was up to him to really take over whatever and whenever he wanted to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think as we're looking forward, I mean, if you're thinking about selling in the next couple of years, are there certain things that make sense to say, maybe these are some areas I've got to do a little bit more thinking about? To me, one of the things is if a company does not regularly do budgeting, I think it is super important that they adopt that, way of looking at things
Hmm.
ahead of time, because at least you can make some of those decisions consciously, right?
Right. I also think wherever your weak points are is to go and build those up. So if you have turnover with staff, I think the emphasis really needs to be on getting that staff in place and working with them. If your marketing efforts are low and you're not bringing in enough business, you probably need to put more effort into that. So, as we have the peer groups and coaches who help us evaluate our business and what we need to do, those are some good areas where a seller could get some advice on what to do because everybody's got areas that are going to need to be improved upon. Certainly, financials need to be strong enough because those are looked at with a microscope.
Yeah, no, there's no question.
Budgeting.
And I think one of the things too that really becomes interesting is how much you engage the team, like who knows what, because as we're maybe adjusting certain things, sometimes that affects somebody that if they don't know kind of what the plans are, and sometimes they can't know, you
Hmm.
know, that adds a different dimension as well.
Yeah, I
You
think there are
know,
many companies who do involve their team. I did not.
yeah,
I had closed books. It's just the way that I wanted to run things. And so I did keep it very quiet, did not tell my staff, my clients, my trades. Nobody really was aware of it. If they did know, I don't know how they found out. But there are many companies who do include, they might say, hey, I'm planning on retiring in 5 years. I'm looking for an owner, or I may want to sell it to the team. And they bring the team in to work with that as well.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think when you think about the evolution of people's roles too, because again, these things can take a fair amount of time from when you
Hmm.
start selling to where they're going to be. How important it is, for example, to have retention strategies with key employees, right? We
Hmm.
don't want somebody to flake out when we're very close to, maybe having a transition, those kinds of things. So I think it's one of those things that taking a step back and looking at the organization as a whole, right? And saying,
Hmm.
like, what are the things that I really need to do, budget wise, staffing wise, commitment of my time to make sure that we're running this thing, uh, in full measure, really right up until the time of sale.
Right,
Because the
right.
other thing is, we know that some sales don't go to settlement, right? They get very close. And it gets very challenging to try to pick up the pieces when you've been sort of winding down and maybe mentally moving on. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, I know. Speaking with IAG, they were pretty clear about continuing to run your business, you're still in the sales mode the entire time, not only with the potential owner buyer, but also with the banks who are going to help finance it. There's a lot of critical views. The gentleman who bought my business had a business coach, had a bank and changed banks, went and got a different bank. So there was a lot of advice coming his way. And I never knew anything about what was happening, but to me, it was crucial to keep that sales process in place.
Yeah. 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 So I think that as people are kind of working down that path, it's, and some of it is, you got to have some of those discussions, I think, maybe with the potential buyer. There is a point where things are close enough that you can have a little bit of a discussion about, maybe things that are coming up. I know sometimes people, oftentimes, especially if it's a leadership team that's taking over, or there's already a relationship, that's a lot easier. But sometimes even with someone that's an outside buyer to say, listen, this renewal is coming up, and it's really going to be more of, I'm going to pay 3 months of it. You're going to pay 9 months of it.
Right. And I did do that. That's a good point. That did happen with us as far as some marketing is, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, the challenge in that is, you got to make sure it's good enough for you if the sale doesn't go through. Right.
True.
The fact that someone may or may not want to do something doesn't become all that relevant if we don't get all the way there.
True. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is a mindset too. It's just easy to be kind of winding down. And I think what a lot of times what I see working with business owners is a lot of what they accomplish is really related to, their own frame of mind, energy level of clarity, things like that. And, any big distraction, cash flow issues, personal issues, health issues can take away from the business. But the sale of a business can be just as distracting, if not more in some cases.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to recognize you have got to keep your head in the game and keep that energy level and that enthusiasm up if you really want this thing to be at the level it needs to be at when it transitions.
Yeah. There was a lot of stress with it, especially since it took twice the length of time to actually close the sale. But not just that, all the business activity that was going on, knowing that I really did want to sell it and having to kind of keep those blinders or those, I guess, blinders on so that I could just stay totally focused on where I was going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the bottom line is, when people get to this point, especially when they start getting closer and it's on the market, or when they actually have an offer, or even when they're working through that offer, it's just so important to realize these things aren't done until they're done. And you have to run the business.
Any sale.
Any sale is the same way. That's right.
And every business owner knows that you can sit there and count on something, and until it's signed, it's not done.
Yeah. Yeah. What did Yogi Berra say? It ain't over till it's over.
Exactly.
I don't know if he was talking about business succession, or he may not have known what he was talking about. But the fact is, it applies here, right?
Yep, that's
true. So you just got to make sure that people stay committed to running all the way through the finish line. So. All right. Well, Kathi, thanks for your insights. Hopefully they're helpful to folks out there that are thinking about it, especially if they're already in the process of, going to market or looking at offers, or maybe even getting to trying to get to settlement. You got to run through the finish line.
Right.
So, yep. So, Kathi, thanks for being with us. I'm Doug Howard, President of Growth Team Strategies. This is Selling the Dream, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast, starring Doug Howard and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.